morning, everyone. Happy January. I would like to call this a regular meeting of the Operations Planning Committee for Wednesday, January 12th to order. And first item on the agenda is to approve the prior minutes from December 9th. Are there any additions? Okay, all right. Any additions, subtractions, changes? Nothing? Okay, Seth moves. Do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Okay, motion carried. Terrific. Okay, next item on the agenda is discussion of matters related to, and I'm up first, so I will go first. First item on my notes is that if you did experience damage from Storm Ida, the deadline is coming up to apply for small loans from the Small Business Association. It's Friday, January 28th. That was pushed out a month, but it is right around the corner. On COVID-related items, we did have a distribution this Saturday, and we had one last Sunday. And last Sunday, we distributed 3,456 tests. This past Saturday, we distributed approximately 1,200 test kits, which had 2 tests in each one. And we also distributed N95 masks. That is all that the state has on the books for us right now. I think if there is another distribution of test kits, it probably will be earmarked for the schools, but at this point I haven't heard anything on that. We have a booster clinic today. Today's Tuesday, right?
No, that's yesterday.
Okay, we had a booster clinic yesterday, and now we will, because of reduced demand, not just in Darien, but actually regionally, we will be going to appointments for boosters, and they will be held on Thursdays. We will have one last Saturday clinic on January, I don't have it down here.
I guess it's 4 weeks after the last one, because the kids, right?
Right. It's for the clinic, the second shot for the children that received it this Saturday. After that, if you do need a booster, you can call the health department and they will make an appointment for you for the Tuesdays. And we have been approached by the state to offer a state-sponsored COVID test clinic, and that appears right now to be something that will be done with a private entity, not through the municipality. And private locations are being explored right now, and we are looking for an appointment model instead of a walk-in model. Dewberry consultants are scheduled to be in Darien at the end of this month, tentatively scheduled for January 27th right now. And those consultants, as you remember, will be helping residents in filling out their applications for FEMA assistance. We have as our point person, Scott Choquette, I'm hoping I'm saying that correctly, who was the state coordinator of the National Flood Insurance Program and also the Deputy State Hazard Mitigation Officer for Connecticut for 9 years before he joined Dewberry in 2002. So we have a very highly qualified person that will be with us. So that session will be a working session for individuals. We will ask them to bring the relevant paperwork with them. So it will be information in the beginning, but it will be a working session with individual attention given to each resident that comes forward. I did meet with Max Friedman, Darien's representative for CCM, and I've asked Max to assist us in adding the potential zoning and any property tax items that are being discussed at the legislative level. The town welcomes 2 new police officers, Kristen Hunt and Craig Jarvis, and 2 new dispatchers, Felix Serrano and Matthew Schullerman. The ARPA committee will hold its next meeting on Tuesday the 18th, and the committee is beginning to organize and prioritize a plan for allocating Darien's funds. We are there is a Metro North New Canaan branch noise abatement feasibility study being done, and I will be meeting with the group later, actually today, to discuss the qualifications for hiring a consultant for that project. And last on my list is the building committee for the elementary school project, and that, as you remember, is to remove the portables and to renovate the libraries in the schools, 3 of the schools. And I want to stress that we are looking for people that have great people skills, people that have great project management skills. If you have a construction background, that's terrific, but that should not be something that you feel you need to have to come forward on this. This town runs on terrific volunteers, and I am convinced that there are some super people out there that would really enjoy being on this committee. You get to work with Duke as Duke's like, but no, there are some super people that will be working on this, and so I'm encouraging any residents to come forward. We'd love to have you on it.
So
And
do you want people, because I'm thinking of a couple people, do you want people to contact you?
Sure.
So
Yep.
that's the proper process.
That would be terrific. Okay, so that's my report. Next up, I'd love to hear what Duke is up to.
Good morning, thank you. Thanks for the plug on the building committee. We've got Sarah Newman, we've got Dave Martin from Finance, we've got Joe McCammon from the Board of Ed, so we've got a good core group. I know Rusty and Kip were all involved, as the rest of the team is, with the current build on Ox Ridge, but to Monica's point, there's always people around here willing to help. And some of the stuff that's been set up, especially around the contract side, and RFP and RFQ, you know, Rusty Schreiner is the master at that. You know, a lot of stuff is in place and the templates are built, which I think is great. And I know Monica's spent some time with Kip and Rusty, and she and I have talked too. So we'll find some people, but if the word can go out, it's much appreciated. And the key to all of this is we've got a good template of the timeline that we used for Ox Ridge, but the key is hitting the end of June deadline for getting the grant submission in. And while our reimbursement rate is low, I think it's important, and that may change over time, but that we get, you know, all the dollars in and get as many dollars out. Kate?
Do you have a means to communicate to the parents
Yes.
of our interest? Because I think it would be a great pool to draw from, especially the parents in the 3 elementary schools that are being worked on. So if there's a way that the Board of Ed can reach out and say, hey, we need these volunteers.
They've gone out, CDSP and the PTOs have gone out and done some of that for us, but it's always good to kind of go out again, I think, and just reinforce the need, because the CDSP also helped with getting some parent representatives for each school, which will sit as an ex officio type member on the committee.
But maybe some of them can be real members.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think it's a good point.
Good
I think
point.
in a committee like this, it truly should be like an all call. We should be reaching out to sort of all corners of the community. You know, parents, taxpayers, you know, elected officials, everyone, to try to populate this with like really the best and brightest, and those that have the most time.
Yeah, great point, Kate, yeah.
Yeah, good.
Jim.
Thank you. Good. So real quick, I'll start with COVID. Our schools are open. I continue to hear in my conversations and emails with other districts, their challenges. Districts have closed for days or multiple days. Right now, there's no relief from the state. There is no desire to include remote as an option. So when we do close or we cannot run a school, a lot of it has to do with staffing. Those days have to be added on to the end of the year. Our end of the year right now, Dr. Adley announced it last night, will be June 15th, which I believe is a Wednesday. And that includes the issue we had with ice and snow this past week. So hopefully the weather will hold and the staffing will hold. I know Dr. Adley and the superintendents, from calls they're on, have really pushed the state to look at a remote option. I think, like anything, that continues to change, and the state continues to look at those options. But you know, their stance is, as is ours, it's best for students to be in the classroom. Again, our investment over the years, thanks to most everyone in this room and all the subcommittees we work with, our investment in technology has proved effective, and are being able to even educate our students that are quarantined I think as of last count, we were up close to 500 kids that were quarantined, and we offer them a remote option, so school continues, so I think that's a good thing. Right now, cases reported January 7th through the 10th are 84. Cases reported so far from a school year standpoint are 708. We tried to get some data, but it's challenging sometimes, and Alicia spoke to us last night. It's a balance. We have no known hospitalizations from children, which I think is a good thing. And again, we're trying to look at how many of them are symptomatic. It doesn't seem to be that many, but the spread is now occurring, in the schools, on top of everything else that goes on in people's lives. The good news is this is literally as of last night or late yesterday with a call that Alan was on. The PCR testing is coming to the schools, and those PCR tests will be available to vaccinated students and non-vaccinated students. So Alan is trying to get more information on that. I think we've distributed thousands of N95 masks. There are 10,000 more masks that we've procured, N95 masks, and there are more test kits, I think 3,000 on the way from the state also, from a school standpoint. We've made some changes based on SEAC guidelines around sports. It's really parents attending the games that's in line with other districts. We continue to look at that weekly based on cases, because we do want everyone to participate. I think a lot of people in this room have participated in Super Saturday, and so we kicked off the budget season for the Board of Ed on Saturday, and we were in person. We had a few people in the audience, and then thank God our Zoom remote works, and so we started about 8:30 and we finished at about 4:45 and went through all the RCs, and we organized it around Board of Ed questions, and then we went to the Board of Finance, RTM F&B, RTM Education, CDSP, and CPAC, all our partners, and then we opened it up to the public. Last night, we started the process of going through questions from the Board of Ed. We will have all the questions answered and out to our committees and partners by Thursday, and then we're confirming a meeting on the 18th with the committees that support us to go over their questions, and of course throughout this whole process questions will continue to come in and information will continue to be looked for, and we'll work through that. I think it's a process that works and really gets everyone involved. We had great participation, well over 100 folks in terms of parents and people in the community participating on Saturday at various points in time. So the overall budget came in at $395 at the top of the house. That's $110,832,569. It is a little over a $4.2 million increase over last year. Just at a high level, a couple of big drivers. Health insurance is a big driver at almost a full percentage point. Contractual wages in terms of the contract is 1.5. Enrollment increases are about 23 basis points. And then there's about 30. Yes, sorry.
How do
Terry.
23 basis points translate to percentage? Just to keep it all consistent.
Quarter point.
Oh, I'm sorry.
0.23.
Yeah.
0.23.
Yep.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Yep. Sorry. Good question. Some increase in IEP and special ed driven increases. But again, the driver health insurance was starting out to be a much larger number, but Rich has done a good job in negotiating with the consortium that we work with. Unfortunately, over the last 2 years, we've had several $million claims from an insurance standpoint with some cancer challenges. So as always, it's just incredible to have insurance when you come up against those challenges. Rich has also negotiated a cap going into next year on the insurance, but initially we were kicked out of the consortium, so we had to look at options from self-insurance to going on the state plan to looking at other options, but we're back in with the consortium, and someone asked, is this, and it is, it's cyclical. Right now, I think he mentioned Ridgefield, it has minimal claims, whereas a couple of years ago, they had high claims too. So, it's kind of a cyclical type thing.
Duke, when you say
Yep.
cap, are you talking about like a pooling level? Because I'd be surprised that you would have $1 million claim and be, have to be responsible for all of that claim in terms of your experience. Usually there's a pooling level where
Right.
once the claim hits a certain point, it no longer impacts you.
The cap is specific to the increase next
Okay.
year on the contract,
Okay.
not specific to that, but
Okay.
yes. Yeah. At a high level too, some of the ads, just from a personnel standpoint, we are expanding, which I think is exciting, world language at the high school, so there's some additional staffing for that. Based on enrollment, we're adding another teacher at Hinley in 2nd grade. We have some paraprofessionals to add based on IEPs. As we get Ox Ridge up and running, based on the size of the school, we'll be adding a custodian. Facilities has asked for a groundskeeper. Some work was done on the amount of acreage that we have and take care of, and some of the stuff that we've had to outsource. And so they're asking for a groundskeeper, which will enable them to not outsource some of this stuff and continue to keep up with the grounds around the schools. As technology drives a lot these days, an extra technician has been put in, more focused on Middlesex. And we are adding one nurse that is specific to an IEP for a student. And then we are adding a driver, and we're looking to add another Suburban to the fleet. We found that having our own vehicles has saved significantly in terms of outsourcing some of those expenses, and the Suburbans really do work all day long in terms of transporting people to and from. So that's been really effective. So I'll pause there and take any questions.
Duke, I have a question on the piece, on the testing.
Yep.
I guess 2 questions on the testing. The implementation of the PCR testing, how does that work with so many kids testing positive? I know my doctor told me that I'd probably test positive for 2 to 3 months after having COVID. So how will that be used in connection with testing kids? Because I think
TBD. This was literally just announced yesterday.
Got it.
By the state. And the state, while they may make an announcement that they're offering PCR kits, kind of everything behind it comes a little after
Make
the
sure they're
fact.
not sitting on a dock in California.
Yes.
Yeah, well, let's see if we get them.
Yeah.
I think it's a good thing, but it's a good point, Jim, and yeah, we will have to work through the logistics and the testing and what does that mean from a quarantining standpoint and stuff like that.
So Duke, the 3,000 tests, those are PCR, not the rapid?
No, they're just the rapid tests.
Okay, so there's 2 separate tests coming.
Correct.
The 3,000, do you have a delivery date?
I do not, no.
And is that what you learned last night?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And then on some of the changes that came down from SEAC, I think a lot of those were recommendations, or the decisions now resting locally
Yes.
with the individual school district and medical advisors?
Yes, they are. Good point. Yes. And we're aligning with our districts as all the superintendents and the health professionals speak. We have, over time, been a leader in changing those rules as we see, our vaccination rate and testing. So Alan does literally look at that, if not almost daily, in terms of those opportunities.
What's the new language being added?
Mandarin.
Oh, I thought we were.
In the Middlesex.
Oh, got it.
Yeah, we're taking it down into the
It's been
Middlesex.
in high school for
Yeah.
quite a few years.
Yeah. No, there's been a big push to get more of the world language down. The only other thing, the other 2 things, and then we can go back to some questions, is Alan has presented changing the technology plan up at the high school, where we were 1-to-1, will continue to be 1-to-1. But there's been a lot of conversation over the year. There was a lot of conversation Saturday on giving the option to students to bring their own device. So that is something that the district is looking at. And they're actually going to do a survey to see how many students are actually bringing their own device. There will always be an option to provide a device if a student is unable to bring a device. And they will organize around standards and specific needs, you know, for what the computer is, but, you know, Chris Tranberg and Jeff Adams spoke about how most of the applications we use now are that kind of open app architecture where they port to any number of devices. The other thing that's garnered a lot of conversation is Open Choice, which is a program that the board has supported Alan look into. So we continue to work through that. We are actually going to organize a special meeting, hopefully around January 24th, where we'll just have specific conversation and presentations and updates. And we will get the folks from CES that run Open Choice back to the district, and we'll have a meeting where we'll just talk more about the one-to-one and the Open Choice.
What is Open Choice?
So Open Choice is a program that's been around for decades, and it's been more up in the Hartford area, and so they wanted to bring it down to Norwalk and Stamford and New Haven, and it's where...
Danbury.
And Danbury, yeah, thanks, Terry.
Legislation that passed last year.
So it's where, if we have open seats based on our enrollment, there's a lottery system where we would work with Norwalk, and Norwalk students would have the opportunity to apply through Norwalk, and Norwalk would set up the lottery system, and if we had open seats, those students would come into the district. Alan has been part of the program in the past. Paul Hendrickson mentioned he's been part of it in Trumbull. So it's a program that Alan supports. What we've seen from a board level seems like a really nice program. I lost my trend of thought.
Yeah, if I
Kate?
could
No.
just add in
Yeah.
a little more detail. It was, the language was specific to, last year, the legislative language was specific to Danbury and Norwalk for the surrounding towns. So for Norwalk, the kids have the option of Wilton, and I don't know if they have the option, those details are not clear.
Right.
Wilton, Weston, New Canaan, and Darien would be the potential receiving districts
Correct.
based on declining enrollment.
Correct.
So I don't know, and then Danbury, it's New Fairfield and Ridgefield,
Right.
and a couple of, Ridgefield does have declining enrollment.
Yeah.
So, and I don't think we do. So there are a lot of factors that feed into
Yeah.
it.
No, absolutely.
But
And-
the program does have some great merits. We just
Yeah,
have
it
to
has some,
make sure.
it has some great benefits. Alan's proposal is, and I think that's where most other districts have done it, that it starts in kindergarten.
Mhm.
So these students start in kindergarten and potentially go through high school. Transportation is provided by the other district. There is a stipend that's provided to the receiving district. And then if students come and over the course of time, starting in kindergarten, there are needs that come out in terms of services. There is a methodology driven by the state as to how the services are provided, but then on the cost sharing, there's a methodology as how that works with between the two districts. So what we have to look at and what we have to think about, I personally think it's a great program. But we have had increasing enrollment. The projection is somewhat flat, but what we have to get our arms around is, as some of these developments come online, what is the enrollment going to look like from some of those developments?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of false information or fear-mongering, I will say, out there on social media as to increasing class sizes and taking away from services. That is not true. We would not change our class size methodology to bring this program on board. This does not take away services from students that need services. Services are mandated by the state and based on an IEP. So we have a lot of things to take into account. And the way the program works is Alan has proposed offering 16 seats. I'm not sure we'll land on that number, but if you do take, just say we took 16 seats this year and we look at next year, and next year some of the developments have come on board, we have an increased enrollment, we don't have to take any more kids the following year. If the following year we have a couple of seats open, we may take 2, 3, or 4 kids. So that's how it works. And
How
that's
are you
we
defining
manage.
open seats?
Based on our class size model.
So that's how he came
So
up
you-
with
you're
16?
saying-
Yeah.
I'm still trying to figure this out. So if you've got classes where you have less than the maximum allowed number of students,
Right.
then the difference, let's say the number's 25 and you've got 24 in a class, then that opens a seat?
Potentially, yep.
How do you think about, just in terms of forecasting some of these, I think we have 3 projects coming on and other things, I mean, is there a certain kind of cushion you're thinking about in terms of, we want to stay at 90% of our max or 80% of our max?
Well, I think some of the schools are, the Middlesex is maxed out as it is in terms of the space and the number of classrooms. So that's all stuff we have to take into consideration. We have built-in capacity. Once Oxridge comes online, it doesn't mean we have to use that capacity because we have to manage the town and the developments that are coming in. So that's all stuff that we'll look at. And it really is a program that has to be looked at each year. So that's why I think we need more discussion about the program and then just the numbers based on our current enrollment.
Because we do make a commitment today when we bring a student on in kindergarten, that they have to by law stay the full 13 years. So if we have a capacity in elementary schools, but there's a bit of a sort of choke point, if you will, in the middle school, we kind of have to look at sort of what's going on with the overall class sizes, sort of throughout the.
Right. Yep.
I would hope too, in the negotiations with the sending district, that we would receive the full ECS funding that they get, so the money follows the student.
Mhm.
I don't think it's right not to.
Right. So more to come on that.
So that, the meeting for that is the 24th?
24th right now?
Right.
Yeah, as soon as we confirm with everyone, our partners and committees and the full board, I'll let everyone here know.
Okay.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
And then Duke, you mentioned a meeting on the 18th. Is that January 18th?
That's January 18th. That will be a follow-up budget discussion to go through the answers to all the questions that came out of Super Saturday. And then traditionally what Alan and I have done last year is where needed, we'll participate in one of Jim's meetings or one of Jack Davis's meetings or one of Ed Washeka's meetings. And we'll participate in one of those meetings to kind of round out maybe questions that they have or information that they're looking for. So it's a good process that has worked over the years. And then we'll approve a budget and then send it over to Jim to approve without too many questions.
No pressure. No
Yeah.
pressure.
I'll let Jack know about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's all I have. Happy to answer any other questions.
Great.
Do you ever have any system where you reach back out to the students, like with the adding the Mandarin?
Yeah.
Find out how it's used, beyond high school to see, do these kids go into, the workforce and they actually get to use what they've learned?
Yeah. So it's a great question, and I think what guidance is trying to do, because it's come up repeatedly at the board, is how do we go back to our students after they graduate and get more information? So literally, the good news is, and it's all challenging stuff, the stuff we're talking about in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We've gotten feedback from students that have graduated as to how they feel they're prepared when they leave the district in terms of diversity and equity and inclusion. But it's something we can expand upon, and that's a perfect point. So we're offering Mandarin. What do you do with it when you go into the workforce, or how does it affect when you go into college? So that's something that the board we've talked about with the administration, and I think guidance, I think is looking at how do we get more information back from students.
I would say my last thought on the 24th meeting is, I think that there's a lack of understanding of how the enrollment projections are made.
Okay.
And so I think having that clarified would be very helpful for residents.
Sure. Good. We actually did put in the budget this year to bring back on board potentially Malone and McBroom to do our annual enrollment projection.
Right.
So we missed a year on that. So we'll have them back in.
Yeah. I mean, we have 297 units, I think, coming on.
Yeah.
And that's without Parkland. So
Right.
I think people are rightfully wondering what formula are we using? And
Absolutely.
if we can shed some light on that,
Good
that would be
point.
great.
If you guys sent some information to Richard.
Okay,
a
I
couple
told
weeks
him to
ago.
make sure we were in sync with you. Good. Okay. Good.
Yeah, there's certainly the new units coming out. I think there's also like this sort of trend of, certainly when I look around our neighborhoods of people moving out of the urban centers and into towns like Darien. Good schools, good services, low taxes.
Right.
So I think it's,
I think there'll be a natural diversity that'll come out of a lot of these developments and great buildings that are being built in terms of people coming into the town. So I think that's a good thing too. So we'll balance that as we think about open choice too.
Right.
and Jeremy, I think, are all of these new developments, do they all have at least 14%
No.
affordable?
No.
No. I'd have to look back on the Palmers. Some of them were 12% because they were approved.
Before
Like
the.
the Palmers were approved
Yeah.
3, 4, 5 years ago. David Genovese was approved 4 or 5 years ago, federal as well. But they're 12% affordable. But the size of the units, whether they're 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, that's the information I sent on to the Board of Ed, because that
Yeah.
plays a role in likely students. You're not likely to see students come out of a studio bedroom
Right.
apartment.
Yeah. But- Although I think if we look at other developments, whether it's Avalon Heights or others, I think we've seen, I think that the results has been we've seen more than what we originally expected.
There were, and I think that's what I talked to Richard and his team about, is the Board of Ed getting multipliers that are applicable to Darien based on what we've seen.
Right.
And whatever math they do, they're able to come up with a range,
Yeah.
and the range changes over time. A lot of people, you're right, Jim, will move here when there's children are young, right? You've
Yes.
seen that. And then they stay, and then the question is, do they stay once their kids are out of high school in that apartment, or do they find somewhere else? So
Right.
there's a lot of factors the Board of Ed takes into account.
Yeah, I think we've seen some of the past projections that while the birth rate in
Way down.
Darien has gone down,
Way
the
down.
actual population of students and so forth hasn't gone down. So I think there's just, to your point, less kids are being born here, but just as many are coming, moving here.
The perfect example of that is just the 41 new kids at Oxridge. I mean,
Right.
throughout the
Yeah.
schools, throughout the school. I mean, you can tell when there's a new school being built and when the brokers are working the neighborhoods that they want everyone to move into, which is a
Yeah.
good thing. So, you can see it, and those are not, they're spread throughout the school. It's not necessarily just families moving in and starting a family and sending kindergartners to school. So it's a good point.
Right.
And Monica, and I spoke too. It's just the methodology that's used right now. We just have to understand what that methodology is. And I think to your point is they may have to change.
Right.
What we may need is just to dig more into the data. What I think a good example is, because it's been there, is Avalon, and see if there's any type of trend there around what came out of Avalon. And those students we put at Tokenique.
It's a lot like what was considered in terms of the accessory dwelling units. When you begin to think about, sort of marginal cost of adding services, population, students, all of that, they're relatively small. I think until you get to a point where you need to do major redevelopment of sewer systems or major redevelopment of certain other types of infrastructure, then it sort of moves into sort of step changes. Much the same way like in the schools, like when you sort of break a section, it's like, it's small, 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 and then it becomes like, when you need to invest in infrastructure, it becomes larger.
The only other date, Monica, that I'll throw out there, which I think is important, and this is all up on the website, but the public hearing on the Board of Ed budget will be February 1st.
Is that going to be here or at the school? Or is it gonna be Zoom?
Good question, Kate. Yeah, because traditionally we've done it here,
Yeah.
so good question
I don't think we have the capacity with,
with the technology.
no, well,
Or-
technology, yeah. I don't think the auditorium has the right capacity, but space-wise, I'm just thinking with, COVID, you're not going to have
Yeah.
enough room for the number of people who likely.
Yeah, because in my past, I think at a high, one time we had 40 some odd people come and speak and line up, so good point, so we'll look into that. Thank you. Okay.
So Jeremy, when you mentioned the Malone study for enrollment, they will look at under 5.
Yes, the
Correct.
way, it's funny you mentioned too, because I was talking to Monica and Kate about the last Malone and McBroom study. What they do is they look at it from a number of angles. They'll go to the town clerk and get the births by month, by year, over time, and analyze that. Then they talk to the real estate brokers, they talk to the folks at the Board of Ed. They look at it from all the different angles. In births, and then they figure out how many people are moving in, and then they get the addresses, the houses that sold, and they look at it by district, so they look at it every which way, and they've done the projections for Darien at least every other year for the past 8 to 10 years,
A
maybe?
decade at least, yeah.
And very knowledgeable. They basically do many of the communities in the state. So they're familiar with the fact that while many, as you acknowledge, many districts are decreasing in enrollment, Darien is one of the few that's either steady or slight increase, depending
Right.
on what day of the week you look at it, which is different than much of Connecticut.
So where do we stand on that study?
We're putting it back in the budget to
Okay.
update the study.
And so when would that study be complete? That'll be next year's budget, so when would that be?
I don't know, I have to figure that out. The budget's approved, so I personally would like to get it done as soon as possible, so we'll look at it that way.
And Jeremy, not to belabor this, but they will capture the people that moved here that have babies that aren't in the system, right? They're not on our birth records,
Correct.
but
They
we
try
see a
to-
lot of strollers.
They match the addresses, is my understanding, with enrollment information from the Board of Ed on the folks that move in. At the same time, they'll contact my office on kind of what's coming on short term, next 6 months to a year, 2 years, 3 years, and they'll try to look at it by type of unit, size of unit, take all the factors into account to try to come up with historic. And what they've done in the past is kind of a low, medium, high
Right.
in terms of expectations.
How do you find, I think to Monica's question, how do you find the families that have moved here that have a 2 and a 4-year-old? So
They
don't
talk to
report it?
daycare, local daycare,
Okay.
the churches, the YMCA, they
Okay.
reach out to them as well.
They
is my
almost
understanding.
knock on doors.
Yeah, it sounds like census workers. Great,
Well, they
thank
used to
you.
look at preschool.
Yep.
Big time as what's the retention ratio out of it, yeah.
I think,
I've been down that.
yeah, I think
It's a very difficult job, trying to figure out those projections.
Yep. With the district, the district itself projections have been very good, the ones that we've done ourselves, and Malone McBroom has been very close. The other thing that I think, as a community we have to think about, and I've mentioned this to Steve, is, you got Parklands coming on board, you may have other buildings in town that fit that model. And to Jim's point, at some point in time, I think we all have to understand what our capacity is. And I think that's something that we just have to do, and then make sure Steve and everyone knows it as you go through the thought process of what the next development or the next conversion of an office building to a residential building looks like. Because there's no real place to build any more schools. We're renovating these schools, we're building in some capacity, but at some point there is a capacity limit to
Right.
these buildings.
Yeah.
And
Middlesex has been at capacity for years, and it works. It's, I think, still the largest middle school in the state.
Wow.
And I think in connection with the
Yeah.
3 elementary school projects, it's probably good to have the projection study, just to make sure that if whatever we need to do there in terms of addition, expansion, replacement of the portables. And I think just back to the high school, in the last 8 years, I think we've ripped out a dozen locker pods and turned them into classrooms.
Every one of them.
And
Every
and
one
we
of them.
finished every one we've ripped out, cut a hole in the wall, put a window in, I think, and then turned it into a
Every
classroom.
locker pod's been converted
It's
to a
gone.
classroom, and then we did the expansion of
The
of
cafeteria a few years ago.
Yeah. One of the largest bubbles right now in that high school is the senior class. So there's a little relief coming
How
through
many
there.
students in senior class?
For
Well, that's a bubble. That's-
36,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's the largest ever class to come
What's the
through.
junior class?
Ever.
Yeah. Under 4.
Wow.
Amazing.
Good.
I remember when we were rebuilding, let's put it Middlesex, and
Yeah.
the complaints because we put extra in the core facilities, we overbuilt in the core facilities, we built the whole building for 900 students, and we built the core facilities for 1,200, and people go, what are you, out of your minds? What are you thinking of? It just shows you can't, trying to figure this out is not easy.
I'm also thinking about the Goddard School for Palmer's with
Yeah.
122 spaces
Yeah,
for 5 and under.
yeah.
Yeah,
That
feeding
will
into
play
the system.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, any other questions for Duke? Okay, we will move on to, thank you, Duke, great
thank you.
report. We will move on to Jim.
Okay, well, I'll try to be quick. I think we're nearing the completion of the town's audit. We have the sort of final documents, and we're working to set up our annual call with the auditor, happen over the next couple of weeks. So that should all be in good shape to coincide with our upcoming bonding for the balance of the Oxford School, as well as some other smaller projects like the tennis courts and so forth. And that bonding, we'd expect to likely be in the market in February. We've seen a little bit of a backup in rates just in the past 4 or 5 days. You know, U.S. Treasuries are up sort of across the curve, kind of 40 to 50 basis points and so forth. The municipal market is still holding in strong, so I think no doubt with our AAA rating will continue to be sort of the cream of the crop in the market. So knock on wood. I think, budget season's obviously underway. The Board of Ed kicked it off last Thursday at their meeting and so forth. So our board of 7 of I've seen all the faces in the Brady Bunch boxes at most of these meetings and so forth.
That's a good way to look at it.
Asking good questions. I think, I would say, couple thoughts on sort of budgeting, which are kind of my thoughts, but I think they're reflective of my board's thoughts. I think as we think about kind of building these budgets and so forth, there's always new initiatives, right, that are sort of coming down the line that we sort of think improve services, right, whether it's Mandarin, whether it's civilian dispatchers and so forth, and they add sort of improve the overall product in Darien and or deliver services more efficiently. But I think it's incumbent on both boards, the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Ed, to continue sort of reevaluate the services that we are providing. Are they still meeting the goals and KPIs that we originally set out? And and I think so during these budget processes, I would encourage both boards, as the Board of Ed has. I think the one-to-one initiative is, I think, one that you guys took a look at and have tweaked and changed a bit. But I think it's incumbent on us all to constantly look at the programs that we have in place and make sure that they're still effective, they're still delivering what our residents want. There aren't sort of alternative programs and solutions we should be looking at, because while Darien's very fortunate to kind of have a large sort of tax base and so forth, resources are not infinite. So I think we need to make sure we're always getting the best use out of our resources. And I think maybe a second observation that I myself and our board has is, a lot of the new initiatives that we look at ultimately have some type of policy decision built into them, whether it's dealing with flooding, whether it's dealing with things like open choice, new staff, and other things like that. And I think we should all make sure that we don't necessarily squeeze policy decisions into a 4-week or kind of 7 or 8 week budget process, and make sure we try to address those, when possible, sort of outside and sort of over the year. Granted, all of our boards work, I'd say 12 months a year, but it's probably 16 months a year. It's given the number of meetings that we all put in. But I think, being able to kind of have a lot of the policy decisions ahead of time, involve the community and so forth, probably set us up to most efficiently deal with things and implement them into budgets. Some of which have very little effect on overall cost, some of which may have bigger effects. So that's really it from the Board of Finance side. Any questions?
I have a question. So a lot of people are hearing inflation. A lot of people are seeing the, government bond rates rise. What's the lag in munis? If we have a 50 basis point rise in treasuries, what does that do to the we're looking at 10-year, 20-year for our projects?
Well, typically our bonding has been over 20-year final maturities, and if you look at the average life, depending on how we amortize it, whether we delay principal for a couple of years, level principal or level debt service, generally ends up with an average life of around 11 years, so generally centers around the 10-year treasury. I think if you look at how the tax exempt market sort of responds to the taxable muni market, treasury market, because there's an inherent sort of tax benefit in investors buying tax exempt bonds. It tends to sort of lag.
Right.
You don't necessarily see the same volatility in the muni market that you see in the taxable market because of the tax benefit. And then I think when you look at sort of Darien itself, Darien has benefits from a bit of a scarcity. When you look at sort of natural AAAs inside the state of Connecticut, there's just not as many of them. A lot of them tend to be sort of located in the southwest corner of the state and don't tend to be the largest issuers of municipal debt. So I think from our expectation, while certainly rates are higher today than they were 4 weeks ago, we don't think it'll have a material impact. And we still think that we'll be able to structure the debt service such that it'll generally keep debt service, structure the new bonding such that debt service will remain constant and continue to decline over the next few years, even as we look at sort of programming in possible bond issuances for the expansion of the 3 elementary schools and other smaller projects that we have. So I think we're in good shape there.
Yeah.
Little bit of a benefit, we do have fund balance, which is, given where short-term rates have been, our earnings on those have been significantly lower, just where rates are. So there's a little bit of a hedge in terms of as rates do go up, our investment earnings will go up as well.
Sometimes it's all about the quirks of the timing and what, because like Jim said, we're a natural AAA. What else is out there? And, who else is selling and who needs paper? If we hit it right at the right time where a bond fund needs AAA paper, we can be golden, so sometimes just the quirks of the market.
Right.
There are times when we tried to go out early, like in January, because nobody else was out there.
Right.
And people would be looking for paper, so it would benefit us. So, but you have to balance that kind of thing with our cash flow needs.
Right.
And structuring the bond issue for, you don't necessarily want a big bond payment that comes due in June,
Right.
because of cash flow.
Right.
We typically structure our bond payments to come due generally right after January or right after July, so that when we're collecting the
Flush.
majority of our tax revenue, kind of 50% on January 1st and 50% on July 1st, we pay off our debt as quickly as possible thereafter, so we don't have a lot of negative carry where we have cash on hand and we're paying interest. So I think we've worked with Jen to kind of equalize that in connection with tax receipts.
Okay. Okay, and you're doing the bonding in February?
That's the expectation, yep.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions for Jim? No? Okay. Thank you, Jim. We will move on to Jeremy, who is filling in for Steve Oveni.
Steve sends his regards. The big news is Corbin project next week. They're going to have a big pour of concrete Monday, I think.
They're hoping for Monday.
So part of Corbin Drive will be closed off, but you'll see a lot of progress being made next week as those things start coming out of the ground, so to speak, and there's a lot of work over there. Last night, the Planning and Zoning Commission had their kickoff discussion on the affordable housing plan. We're going to get started with that because really the state pushed up the deadline, as I mentioned at our last meeting, to the end of June, really, which means we're going to have to go out to the public in May. So it'll creep up on us very quickly. I'll be meeting with the PZ&H committee, Amy Barsanti and her group tomorrow, to update them on the goings-on for this upcoming year, which we talked about last time. Affordable housing plan, marijuana, cannabis, and accessory dwelling units, which we'll probably bring to the RTM in maybe October, November.
Oh, ADUs,
Well, we have to address it somehow. The state-
but I guess it's that long, to your point about having policy discussions
Right.
that.
The state has forced that discussion
No,
upon
you're
us,
right, you're right.
so we have to make a decision one way or the other.
Right, I just.
If we
thought-
don't opt out by the end of this year,
Right,
we're stuck with it. So that means going to the RTM before the end of the year.
of course.
How late do you want us to go to the
Process.
RTM is going to be a question I will ask you in a
What's-
few months.
What's your deadline?
End of the year.
December.
That's for ADUs, Jeremy? I thought it was 23.
Did
I thought it was early 23. I'll have to double check, but my belief was we've got to address the issues
Right.
one way or the other.
Right. And you'll have, the RTM, you'll have a captive.
Right, we'll do what we did with
Yeah,
parking.
I think
for the
getting
same.
them all in is a good plan.
How do we want to handle it? So
Right.
you'll hear a lot more about that in the future.
Any questions for Jeremy?
No.
Jeremy, I have one question. So how is Dave working with WestCog for the affordable housing?
What WestCog has done to benefit the communities is done what they've called an annex, which is really an appendix of data and general strategies and general information. It's about 110 pages long, that any community that's working on their plan will be able to use as a resource. Instead of each town going out and gathering their own data and information, this is one packet for every community to use how they wish. So I think we're going to use that as a great jumping off point. It's probably saving us months and months of work.
Right.
And we'll pick and choose what pieces we want from that 100-page annex to include. I think the sense I got from the commission last night was they don't want this plan to be a very long document. I think succinct, short, general is the way they're coming from, because the state's going to require us to update it every 5 years.
Do you want to speak to the website?
Yeah, we did set up a web page as a resource for the commission and the public, darien.ct.gov/AH plan, which is on that website. It has a copy of the state statute, a copy of the town's 2009 plan, other communities' plans, a variety of resources and information that we'll keep adding to, because what we found is as you copy communities' other plans in the WestCog 100-page document, it was just too much paper to start handing out paper to everyone. So it's a resource, people can pick and choose what they're interested in, and it will be helpful to us as a staff, but as the commission and the public as a resource as well.
And Jeremy, all the work on the plan, are we handling that all in-house? Do we need?
Right, WestCog is going to be the resource for the data background, and former Assistant Director Dave Keating is going to be brought on because of his local knowledge of local zoning, how the other projects have gone through, our success stories in Darien, and he'll work with us here on pulling together the plan and the commission. Dave was at last night's meeting, and he'll be working with the commission every 3 to 4 weeks on getting this moving along.
That's great. You know, it's admirable how much knowledge and resources we have, like within your department, within our commission, and sort of within our town, and like how we're able to sort of handle and plan for whether it was the 30G moratoriums or other things. Just sort of looking at some of our surrounding towns. New Canaan just announced that they're having to go outside and hire a number of advisors to kind of work with them as part of their plan. I think it's kudos to the broader Darien team here in terms of what you guys were able to accomplish in-house.
Yeah,
Great.
what we're finding is, we just had a call earlier this week, Norwalk, Westport, Darien, comparing notes on how'd you do this, and a lot of communication with Greenwich, other communities on, hey, what worked, what isn't working. So it's using the other communities as a resource as well. But you have to have local knowledge, and we felt that that was essential to getting this
That's
done.
great.
Hello, are we in the right place? Room 206?
You were looking for what?
How can we help you? What,
Would that be with Ed Gentile?
I don't think in here.
I called yesterday. They
Lenny,
said
can you
206.
check?
I think, Jeremy, it's to what Jim is saying, it's great that we have these resources. Also because we have 168 other municipalities that are looking for consultants,
Exactly.
because you all have the same end date, so.
Yeah, when we
we're
spoke to one
fortunate.
consultant, he said, look, you have the ability to do this, and you have the resources in-house. Call me if you have any questions, but when the state says to 169 towns, you all have to get this project done by June, there's not a lot of consultants that can even do the work. So this guy was like, he's booked.
Right.
So it's going to be valuable to have the local knowledge, and more importantly, what isn't going to work here that might work in another community, that's just as important for us to understand.
Okay. Anything else for Jeremy?
No, but thank you.
So Jeremy, when is Parklands back up?
The first discussion was last night. They'll discuss it again on the 25th, and probably make a final decision on the site plan February 1st would be my guess, as they kind of hash out the various issues. The first conversation was last night, as you know. So,
Okay. If no more questions for Jeremy, we will move on to Seth. Hi, Seth.
Hi.
Thanks for coming.
Busy in the RTM and in the Rules Committee. Not with things that are ready to be voted on, but with projects that are
Okay.
headed in that direction. The Rules Committee assigned committees on Monday night. We're doing a rewrite of the standing committee descriptions in the town code, because when we started handing out the preference sheets to all the new members, we actually read them this time, and they've been written so long ago that there are parts of them that are just obsolete, so we're gonna redo them. And then we've got, the F&B committee is putting together a grid so that helps us decide what committees are gonna get assigned to what kinds of projects. Much easier than sitting there and saying, well, what do you think on this one? You know, at least it gives us a starting point. So that's going on. Unicode gave us a response on degenderification of the town code. It was sloppy, and so in consultation with town council, we returned it to them with some ideas.
Okay.
We're waiting for them to come back with another iteration of that. We are going to modify Appendix B. The proposal is just to eliminate the need to publish things in the newspaper, warnings in the newspaper, because we've got so many electronic ways for people to access the information. It's expensive, and also having to publish, the way the Appendix B is written now, it's a 10-day notification, so 10 days before the meeting. Well, if anything changes in the 10 days, you don't have much flexibility there. You've already put the agenda out there. We do have the ability to amend at the meeting, but it's, you know, it's, so that's going on. And Terry will enjoy this. The state Senate and the State House of Representatives redistricted the Senate and state districts here in Fairfield County, Southwestern District. And in the northern part of Darien, they put in about 2 or 3 different districts. And how that's going to impact our voting districts is a question mark. So we've assigned the TGSNA committee to work with the town registrars and with the town clerk to figure out how we're going to manage the next voting cycle. They don't have to do anything until the fall, but we'll start working on it now. It's complicated. From a District 3 standpoint, speaking from there, we're thrilled to have Terry Wood coming over to us. Nothing wrong with Matt Blumenthal, but great. The next item that we're dealing with is an error in the minutes to the RTM meeting going back to June and October of 2020 that has to do with bond issue. We didn't attach the bond resolutions to the minutes. So actually the real reason on the 24th of January that we're going to have an RTM meeting is to correct the minutes so you can issue the bonds in February. A technicality, but we had no way out. Bond counsel said, no, you will have a meeting and you will correct the minutes. Thank you very much. So that's what we're going to do. We also have the town employees contract.
Not yet.
And the only question that's hanging up is, we're not sure if it's 30 days from when the union signs the contract, or is it 30 days from when we accept the contract?
No, that's actually not a question. Once somebody ratifies it, whether it's them or the Board of Selectmen, that's when the 30 days start.
All right, so
They still have not set a date for ratification, so, and they raised an issue last week of language they feel is incorrect so we have to, we have something to iron out with them. Hopefully, they will vote. My real concern is that your February meeting isn't until the 28th.
Right.
And if they do something like vote on it on the 25th of January, where
That's
it won't be going to the
not
RTM.
good.
Well, it's, the thing is, the RTM's vote is simply not to reject. And while I think it's appropriate that the RTM and all the boards get their opportunity to opine on it, if the RTM were to reject the contract, what in all likelihood would happen is we'd be going to an arbitrator. The arbitrator would impose what we've already agreed to. So I don't think there's going to be any great harm to the town if we don't get the opportunity to bring the contract to the RTM, but I would like for it to happen. And we are trying to make sure that happens.
Well, if they do it before the 24th, we do have the ability in the RPM to amend the agenda by a 2/3 vote. So we could conceivably
Yeah.
take it out.
Yeah, the issue with, could, yeah.
I prefer.
I prefer to follow the
Whisper
normal.
to the union, we prefer not to do it on the 20, have them
Yes,
sign on the 24th.
we've made it, yeah, we've made it clear, so.
So, other than that, we could have a special meeting in February, I suppose, to deal with the contract. We'll wait and see.
Yeah.
We'll talk. The other thing, we did assign 5 members to standing committees. The Rules Committee did, to standing committees in the RTM, so we're about full. I've got maybe one more person, so we're up to the 99, 98 people, which is great.
Any districts open?
I think there's 1 in 6, but I'd have to go back and look at that to be absolutely precise on that. We need volunteers in the RTM we need a volunteer for the Blight Review Board and a volunteer for the Town Technology Committee. There's a slot in each of those committees for an RTM member. Just for publication, Blight Review is really a person who could have some knowledge of real estate, but also it's a public health and safety thing as well. So there might be individuals in the RTM who have some background in that and could serve effectively on the Blight Review Board. The Technology Committee to be on that is really quite broad. You might be a person who is in a position where they're in financial review on technology issues, and they would therefore assimilate some knowledge of how you make decisions on technology. You could be a technology person yourself and be sitting in your job doing that. So I would just urge RTM members who might volunteer for that to have a broad look at what are you doing in your job, what are you doing volunteer. There may be a way that you could contribute to the Technology Committee. We have established a tradition of inviting guest speakers to come early, right after the State of the Town, from other towns and places to brief us on things that are going on with them that could affect the town. So we've invited David Knopf to come in and just talk about COVID-19, because that's really current and everybody's interested in it. Jessica Casey, who is the Economic Development Director for Norwalk, is going to talk. And the Executive Director of the Western Connecticut Council of Governments, Francis Pickering, is going to come on and talk about what the WestCog. Everybody knows the word WestCog. There's a lot of people who don't know what it is, really. And so we invited him in to come in. Actually, it's a suggestion from Jamie Stevenson. We couldn't get him until now, but.
Francis Pickering, I've worked a great deal with Francis Pickering, and he's an extraordinary resource.
You know, well, he was
And
very
deeply
nice.
knowledgeable.
He's
He really
terrific.
said, oh, boy, I'd love to do that.
He
So-
does, he knows details about details that are relevant and helpful.
So it'll be an interesting meeting.
Yeah. When is
Lauren
that?
Nodris is the new Director of Economic Development for Stamford. But she doesn't start until February 1st, so she couldn't come. the prior gentleman, Tom Madden, has been replaced by her. So she comes from New York City, worked in economic development in New York City. So I think we'll get her eventually, I hope, and I think it'll be very interesting. The technology committee is working on the technology of how we could set up hybrid RTM meetings. Right now, RTM meetings are virtual, and so are the rules committee meetings, and I think most of our committee meetings are still virtual. But we are working on that. It's interesting, the RTM doesn't have any money. Most of our money that's spent on us is spent through the town clerk. So, but we understand there's ARPA. So we are headed in Mrs. Bush's direction, because we understand that she sort of has some miscellaneous piece to the ARPA, her part of ARPA.
Well, that's,
And I'll
that's
open
me.
this up to her thoughts. But anyway, we'll be in touch.
You've been in touch. Everybody's been in touch. We're well aware, and I believe, the committee's aware, and John Zagrodsky, Jen Trenesky, and I are the kind of everything else category. And we have a meeting next Tuesday, and talking about ideas, and so that will be one of them. But we're going to need more, and I know you're working on getting a proposal together.
Lois Schneider is the head of the Rules Committee, Technology Committee, which is driving this.
I think one of the important things would be to discuss how whatever you propose would be usable or beneficial to the town beyond the pandemic. In the days when the
Right.
RTM meets in person again, what other uses will this have?
It's going to be interesting. Particularly, we're waiting to see what the governor's going to do here, right? April 30 is the end of the current permission that we have to have hybrid meetings and vote, to have remote meetings and to vote that way. Whether he will continue that will be interesting. I sense there's comfort of people sitting in their homes, participating electronically in the meetings, rather than having to get in their car and drive over here to town hall and get in the auditorium, but that may change.
Is that specific to RTM meetings?
Well,
Hmm?
we're allowed.
Or, because we've gotten council and, we've been hybrid, voting hybrid, everything for months.
But
But this
April,
is
the end of
remote.
April, you will no longer have the blanket authority. At that point, you could, under FOI regulations, continue to have hybrid meetings, but you should have a policy for how, when you will do that.
How you collect the votes, how you verify who's,
Yeah.
The thing in the FOI law is, anybody who's participating remotely has to be identifiable to the public who are viewing the meeting, whether in person or like on TV 79.
Which is easier with 9, 7, or 5 people than it is with
Right.
9.
Yeah,
the
no,
other
100, yeah.
requirement by the governor is a roll call vote. We had one roll call vote this year, and it went on forever. And so we have a way, the town council has ruled we can use, which is to check first and ask if there are any no votes. And if there are no votes, then it's assumed that everybody else voted yes, and so we are able to record their votes that way. It's worked out pretty well. So that's it. Our meeting for the RTM comes up on January 24th, and mostly the main driving thing that we've got to do is correct the minutes so that you can do the behind issue. That's my report.
So, does anyone have any questions? So Seth, I have a couple. So on the roll call vote, you're asking for no's. Are you asking for abstentions
Yes.
also? You are, okay.
Excuse me.
Okay.
Yeah, the
Right.
rule
Mrs.
was that.
Schneider, my trustee vice,
Right, I just
reminds
wanted
me
to,
periodically.
yes, I just wanted to get that on the record.
It has to be unanimous in order for us to
Yes,
not
right.
do a roll call.
Right. And then
Although the
on,
extensions don't count.
Then on the rewriting the committee descriptions, is that rules that's doing that, or TGSNA?
It's TGSNA
Okay,
with help from F&B.
okay. And then I just want to
And then it
give,
will be the rules committee will approve the final one, and then we'll put it on the agenda of the RTM.
okay. And then I want to give another plug for Francis Pickering at your 24th meeting, January 24th meeting. I think that residents that tune in for that will find it very, very informative. He's just a wealth of knowledge, so.
Well, that's great.
Whatever you do to advertise that would be great.
Right,
Okay.
right. People will, I'm sure, appreciate that after they've listened, so. Okay, so last on our agenda, do I need to add Terry to this agenda? It's not.
Well, Terry's not a member of the committee.
Okay.
She's a guest. But
Okay, so we have a guest here today. Terry, do you have anything you want to share with us?
Very,
She's
very
not
briefly.
guest, she's family.
Yes, we start session a month from today, so I will not be here on February 9th. This is the short session, so it's a 3-month session. We can start bill proposals now, submittal now. Some of this recurring themes will be happening again, the affordable housing and the zoning efforts, rezoning efforts to eliminate single-family zoning. Tax fairness, which is always sort of an interesting debate, so that's coming forward again. Again, short session, we don't have the kind of time we have in the long session, so it'll be interesting to see what moves forward and what doesn't. But certainly, stay tuned. I do send out an email, so those of you who don't get my email, you can sign up, call me in Hartford. That's it.
Any questions? I have a question.
Yes,
Do you have the end date for this session?
yes, June the May 5th, May 4th, midnight, May 4th.
Okay. And Terry, what?
Not that we're counting or anything.
Yeah.
Well, no, because you have to, there's all kinds of things that happen right after that. That's why I happen to know that date.
Is the rationale for a short session because it's an election year?
Good question. Short session, until about 30 or 40 years ago, the legislature did not meet in the short session. The short session is specifically to address budgetary items. Somehow, budgetary items has been expanded to include a host of other things. So that's why short session was put in specifically to address budgetary needs.
Do you ever see it being just one long session every year?
You mean one? So what do you mean?
One full session?
Like make it a 5-month, 5 months and 5 months both years? We meet more often than many state legislatures. Virginia, I think, meets 45 days, and they're done. New Hampshire is short. I think that's a longer discussion.
Okay. Okay.
I think we do. We shouldn't have too much time, and then you have to look at compensation, because we are compensated now as part-time, a part-time legislature. So the conversation would change significantly around that. It would eliminate a lot of people who are able to do it now, part-time, attorneys, real estate brokers, small business owners. It would just change the conversation and certainly change the finances.
Okay, but just to be clear, I'm referring to a January start instead of a February start.
Oh, I don't know why they did, and that's set in our Constitution, so I'm not quite sure. I can find, we do have some Francis Pickerings of the legislative process who know all these details. I can probably find out.
Okay. Anything else?
Just talking about legislature, this state, despite its size, physical size, is complicated because there are some major cities. And so where Rhode Island might not be, there's a small state, they could do part-time, It seems to me that with the complexities that we have with these major cities, that And also with our financial situation the way it is, that having full-time sessions, people working full-time might be a very good idea to try and provide some strong leadership and some strong efforts to try and clean up the financial situation and run the state better.
Well, I will be, being truthful, there are many of us who do work at it full-time.
Oh, I bet you do.
So, and in any case, when we're not in session, the governor can, or we, the legislature, can petition to call ourselves into special session. So should there be an urgent need, we can work outside the legislative session. But there are, I would say most of us work full-time on legislation and public hearings. I've got 2 public hearings, not public hearings, but Zoom meetings, informational hearings ramping up for the session. And I think I've got 6 this week. And this takes a lot of time. So if you're a lawyer with a full-time practice, you can see how that impacts. Or somebody who commutes to New York is virtually not able to do the job.
Right.
So, but it would take a change in the Constitution to move it to January.
Okay, understood.
Many of us would like to see this short session eliminated and more thought put into things and do fewer things and do them more thoughtfully. Because so often we do have to look at legislation and fix it for unintended consequences the following year.
So your scenario would be there would be a session every other year?
Well, I mean, longer discussion, but I think it's
Something to think about.
It's
Okay.
something to think about. It's something to think about. How can we, like any organization, we should always be looking at how can we make it function better.
Mhm. Okay. Any other questions? Anything else to discuss?
No,
Okay.
thank you.
Could I have a motion to adjourn? Jim Palin, Duke seconds, all in favor? Unanimous. Super.